Yamaha MT-03 Review First Ride. Socially distance yourself on the dark side of Japan. Just because they cancelled South by Southwest doesn't mean MO would let a little thing like a global pandemic keep us from our appointed rounds, and so it was off to Austin, Texas, to ride Yamaha's new entry-level Master of Torque last week. Or maybe it should have deterred us, since on my day to fly home again, we got word that the US MotoGP round, scheduled for April here in Austin, was also postponed due to coronavirus. Then the IOMTT, then the run on toilet paper. And now my throat's a little scratchy, maybe this thing is not a Chinese hoax. But that's not important right now. Yamaha tells us cheap, small bike sales are booming, okay, not booming, but not in the tank as much as other bike sales. So, they needed something to compete with the Kawasaki Z400, the KTM 390 Duke, etc., and the MT-03 is it. Not just based upon the YZF-R3 but pretty much the same bike with the fairing removed, MT-03 differences are restricted to a steel handlebar mounted in rubber instead of clip-ons, slightly softer damping in its 37mm inverted fork, and no more full fairing. For a mere $4,699, it's a very perky and even attractive little package. The 321 cubic centimeters parallel twin is as big as it can get, since it began life as a 250. We're pretty fond of saying it's not all about the power, but with little bikes like these, it kind of is. That's their appeal, too. On fun roads where you never get your R1 halfway to redline, on the MT-03 you've got the throttle to the stop pretty much out of every corner. As Fred Gassett used to say, you give it all the berries you can muster. Unlike so many new bikes, it retains actual throttle cables you can stretch. No ride-by-wire here. Fueling is excellent, and even if it wasn't you'd never notice, since there just isn't a lot of power to ever kick back in. Though it bolts up solidly in the steel frame, buzz is almost completely absent except when you're bouncing the engine off redline. The 6-speed gearbox is a willing, slick accomplice. The steel frame in this one, which Yamaha calls a diamond-type tube frame, looks a lot like the one in the MT-07, and that bike is a MO fave in the handling department, as well as the engine one. MT-03 chassis dimensions are very similar to the 07. The MT-03's rake is 0.2 degrees steeper, at 24.8 degree, and its trail is 0.2 inches longer, at 3.7. The 03 is nearly an inch shorter of wheelbase, at 54.3 inches. To the 07's 55.1 inches. The 03's long swing arm, 22.6 inches to be specific, also aids its handling, just like it did on the original R12 many years ago. Your brakes aren't exactly the latest tech or even from the latest decade, but given the low power and especially the light weight of the package, they work fine. You get ABS, which is great for avoiding crashing into cars that turn in front of you, but it's not the latest lean-sensitive kind, which means you still have to use your touchy-feely skills trail braking into corners. Thanks to the nearly ubiquitous IMU, notable by its absence here, maybe you don't need to learn those skills anymore, just like you no longer need to learn to write in cursive. But we old people still think it's a good skill to pick up, and the R3 is a great teacher. Its 373-pound claimed wet weight means you'll have to recalibrate yourself to ride it as fast as it's capable of going around corners. MT-03 bikes, of course, corner way faster than heavier, more powerful MotoGP ones. The Dunlop Sporty Max GP300 radial tires our Austin bikes were on aren't the latest and grippiest, but they're close enough, and the relative skinniness of their sizing 110/70 front and 140/70 rear also contributes to the 03's quick, nimble, but unfailingly stable handling. Suspension isn't quite cutting edge either, but you do get a 37mm inverted KYB fork. There are no adjustments to screw around with other than the rear shock's 7-step preload collar, but unless you're unusually heavy or unusually light, I don't think you'll miss them. Yamaha's been around the block a few times building sporty motorcycles, and the MT-03's 5.1 and 4.9 inches of front and rear suspension travel handle bumpy back roads, lumpy freeways, and smooth pavement with zero problems. Not too stiff, not too soft, and with excellent front-to-rear balance and nicely progressive damping that lets you make the most of its perfectly adequate brakes and happy little motor.